Howdy. Paul Stone, Legends and Lies. Thanks for tuning in. So we've been talking about the legend of, the American dream. And for so long, for thousands of years, anything like America was absolutely a dream. If you think about it, it was a blank canvas. It was untapped territory. So where everyone lived in Europe and the rest of the world, right, they had the rules and regs and the ways of doing things and their limitations, and people felt trapped. And so there was finally a land where if you wanted to, and you had the audacity and the mental fortitude to leave everything you were used to, you could move to this land and set up shop, and you could do whatever you wanted. Imagine how fast that land, if there was a land today that no one had moved to, a good couple thousand miles across, different climates, because we could, probably all, take over or move to Greenland. There's just, there's not much going on there. Denmark owns it. But my point is, if we suddenly discovered a land the size of America, we could all move there and bail out on a government oppression and how tough life is today. And we'll be talking about that in a second and why. How many of us would move there right now? Let go of everything we're used to, the family and the friends and, our bed, right? And just go there. Tons of us would do that today. I would do that today. So when we think about the American dream, it was a land where there weren't these oppressive, restrictive, controlling, suppressing rules and regs. And I'm not talking about, there's no law. There was, of course, law. There was British law at the time. But you could go create, right? You could go be exactly wherever it is you wanted to be. On the mountaintop, on a river, in the prairie, out in the woods, in the city, town, on the coast. You could go do that. And so the American dream became a reality. And when we use the word legends, generally that can apply to something that has come and gone, right? And I believe that the American dream for most people is gone. I think it's been gone for a few decades. And I don't want to talk just about that. Remember, with me, we're going to talk about news articles, and we're going to see them as symptoms, a big blinking beacon, drawing our attention to a problem by illuminating that there's a symptom that isn't a good sign of how we are today versus how we used to be. Because if things are flashing that didn't used to flash, then something has shifted. And that's what I want to draw your awareness to, specifically today to the youngsters, right? And I still consider myself young and slightly immature, but obviously I've been around the sun a few more times than someone who would be called young today. And the first article I want to jump out to, we'll get to here in a second, is on how tough it is to go to school. Now, myself, I'm a bit of a screw up, all right? So I'll just level with you. I've made many millions of more mistakes than I have made, smooth, sound decisions. My parents had no shot at, keeping me in a box, if you will. I was a bit of a jet engine with no navigation. When it came to sports, I was a killer. And I had the dream of being on TV, playing football or soccer. I used to slide tackle, numerous times a game. I absolutely loved soccer, loved football, came to love football more as I got older. But I would slide tackle people, and I would throw my elbow down, and I would jam it into the ground and start, pop myself back up while you were still falling. So I absolutely love sports. That was a good place to be a jet engine with no navigation, because they just tell you what the rules are, when I was young. And in all of my screw-ups, as you get older, you start having these conflicts with the one you're with, and you might end up, someone might suggesting to you to go to marriage counseling, go to therapy. And one of the things that's relevant today that I learned out of all that time, and spent a lot of time with a life coach working and chipping away at all my rough edges over the last 2 decades, is that when there's a conflict between two people, someone has to go first. Someone has to go first. And in that person that's going first, by the way, is growth. because you're not getting what you want. You're going to, in a way, start to offer what the other person might want. And so when we look at that ethic, and I empathize so much, if we broaden that out, right? We've got the government, they're printing money. We've talked about that. We'll continue to talk about that because that's a falsehood, financial energy. It's an energy, a false energy, right? That is creating a shape in our humanity that isn't legit. It isn't real. And it's causing all these conflicts. And I'm going to get to another version of that and how it's crushing our youngsters these days. And I want the youngsters to understand it's just not your fault. If life is super confusing, if you're overweight and you've dyed your hair purple or orange, or the piercings or the tats or the running away or the homelessness or just all the depression, the sadness, yeah, of course, to all y'all out there that are doing great, great. But I'm pretty sure that even inside of the ones that feel like they're doing awesome in life, there's still a sadness. There's still perhaps a loss of connection. And when we look at parents and kids and conflicts, and we look at the government and its citizens and conflicts, right? Who's going first? Who's speaking up first to take ownership of their part in causing the conflict? And one thing I've learned about me is a lot of times it was my part to do more research, to do more investigating, to look into something deeper, rather than just assuming what my superior brain power was telling me at the time was that was all there was to know, and what I knew was right. And that caused me much pain and anguish in life. I just figured I was programmed with what you were programmed with, right? Which is good, godly intuition. And if it kind of came to me and it didn't seem to cause, anyone to die or, a big pain in someone's life, it must be what I've come to learn as the term to be in alignment with how nature works, right? So when we look at all my mistakes, all my failures, which we can get into on other episodes, I would grow if I could go first. Now, so if we have two people who could speak, parents and kids, right? Or the companies to the parents, or the government and the people, is anyone who's taking ownership? And we would need, in this regard, the government to kind of take ownership, to recognize that this false financial energy it's creating is distorting humanity. It is the change agent that has caused it to be wildly difficult and unfun, and just, I can't even imagine what it's like to go to school today. Yeah, once you're out of elementary school. Because elementary school is probably mostly the same. But I feel for the kids that are dropped off and stay after school and they're really young because parents have to work. Why do both parents have to work? When we look at all of human history, and this isn't sexist, I won't ever that's always up to whoever's going to be a mom or work. But when we just look at all of humanity, right? If we look at any species, does it really change much? Some go extinct. It's crazy. Point of fact, I think 99 or 97% of all things that ever lived are extinct. So stuff does come and go. But when we look at anything outside our window, animals, insects, bugs, trees, plants, the rain, the way it rains, all that stuff stays the same. So where has the change come from when it used to be okay to go to school? Suicide rates were lower, drug use was non-existent. Yeah, people were drinking Budweiser or what have you after school or on the weekends. But generally speaking, when I look back at society, right, they were having a lot more fun than teenagers and youngsters are having today. What caused the difference? Are we flawed? Is it this, fluoride in our water? That might be a part of some things. But when we look at humanity, American youth at large in this country and probably around the world, unemployment is really high for youngsters in Europe. So when we look at what's changed? A huge change is, unfortunately, moms not getting the right to choose anymore whether their job is going to be mothering or working somewhere. So kids are kind of raising themselves. And to me, if any baby out there that was used to having its mother around for a while suddenly couldn't, that would be tough, and it would cause a change in whatever species we're talking about. So who goes first in this government relationship to its people, the government causing all of these troubles, right? And when we look at test scores in article number 1, we can see parental applicable truth that kids are struggling. Because I got to believe that one of the main ingredients to doing well in school is enjoying it somewhat. It can't be all of this peer pressure. It can't be about your Instagram account and the bullying and all that stuff and surviving all those unfair pressures that never existed before. People, if they were going to talk, smack about you, they might kind of, gossip obviously is ancient, but they might do it to your face. Now they can do it behind anonymity, right? They can be masked, they can be secretive, you don't know where it's coming from. You can also not even know it's really happening in social media today. So we don't necessarily want to talk like, say, social media is bad. We want to talk about the lacking in resilience and the stronghold of one's fortitude to be able to repel the nasty, ugly stuff that's coming at it, because humanity has always had that to deal with. So what's different about today? When we look at the first article, a new batch of student test scores indicate a slump in college and career readiness, as well as a decline in science knowledge. Okay. Both of those could have profound implications for the country's economic future. After reading and math scores amongst 12th graders fell to their lowest levels on record in 2024. What does that talk about? Right? You can't learn, then you didn't learn, and life keeps moving you forward. One day you're 13, one day you're 23, one day you're 33, 43, you know what I mean? So life keeps moving forward. And if we aren't in alignment with what we needed to be capable of achieving, then we don't achieve those things, and the pressure mounts, and the guilt mounts, and the shame mounts, and I absolutely know what that's like. I'll share this one. About 30 years ago or so, just almost 30 years ago, I was so depressed. I was extremely depressed. I was definitely comparing my insides by your outsides. I was saying that I was garbage. I was an utter failure. And the worst word that, I could ever hear as a kid was, he had so much potential. Paul has so much potential. It stabbed me in my heart every time I heard that, because, oh my God, you're just saying that I should be way up here and I'm down here in achievement or in, delivering on what all my other peers are delivering on. So that makes me separate, that makes me different, that makes me a loser. That makes oxygen that I'm consuming a wasted effort by our green-leafed plant friends that make it. That's where I was 30 years ago. So I can relate to anyone who's struggling today, and confusion is the seed ground that all of that depressed hell, in my opinion, comes from. Definitely not giving a therapy lesson, but definitely worked on generating awareness for me to be able to understand, how the hell do I end this confusion? Because I can't change my situation unless I can bring about some clarity to it. So these test scores that we're talking about, I understand the pressure for all of you out there that aren't doing well in school. And maybe, the school system is just lowering its standards so you guys get at least graduated and move on to the next grade, and eventually you're out of the school system altogether. Parents both working. Parents stressed out. If I could change one thing for everyone in this country and around the world today, I would choose that your earnings were much greater than your bills. You just let that soak in for a minute. Anyone who's watching, just for a second, because I know 70% of you aren't living in that environment. That's not your reality. Just imagine, I can just hear the sighs of relief, the millions of people that would be sighing massive, and I mean forever. That's how it always used to be, folks. Wages used to grow faster than the cost of living up until, for all of millennia, up until 1971. Then that shift happened when Nixon did what he did with the gold standard. When he made it possible for the government to create money out of thin air. And I know this one goes on and on, like, oh, Paul, you mentioned that last time. You mentioned that every time we pretty much talk to you. It is the cause of why kids find it to be a miserable time going to school. They aren't adults. I wasn't an adult. Yes, I thought of something. I told myself that was the right way to look at that something, and I believed it. So yes, it's always going to be permanently going to be tough to tell a young kid that the way they're looking at it isn't either the full picture or correct or accurate or even a good idea, right? I will say this, whatever parents are saying, kids are absolutely learning from watching you 90% of what they're learning. And I think that's one of the things that saved me. I'm blessed. My parents stayed married. I only saw them have 2 fights. I think both were in the kitchen. They were very short-lived. Nothing was thrown or broken. So I'm very blessed there. That's a key ingredient to the resilience I have that I am still breathing today. But you know, parents don't know parenting. I mean, the first time kids, you play a video game, how good are you? Right? You're not that good. So parents will struggle to be parents. Parents' job has always been difficult. I'm a parent, 2 stepkids and a son of my own who's 21. So I know it. I used to coach football. I was always participating in his life. And he still ended up with an enormous amount of struggles to overcome. And I've chipped in and been present and available and owned the crap that the crappy decisions and the crappy choices and the occasional outburst or the guilt and the shame that I put on him. And I've owned that, all of it. Whatever he brings up, I'm responsible for that. Someone has to go first. So when it looks at parents, and my biggest complaint as a kid was I didn't ask to be here. I didn't ask to be here. And I had good parents, but I still had this hope that someone one day would just tell me I was adopted, because that would give me some clarity, because I didn't feel like I fit in the world around me. I didn't fit in. All this potential delivering down here. I had my ideas. They were wrong. They were narrow-sighted. I couldn't see over the horizon like someone in their 30s and 40s can start to see over the horizon, because they've been around the sun many more times. That old saying, right? Wisdom or youth is squandered on the young, right? Because you don't know much when you're young. You know all this stuff when you're in your 40s and 50s, but now you're not young. But to get that experience and wisdom, you had to live, you had to make your mistakes. Another huge problem I see today is we don't get to make mistakes. The world just crashes down onto us when we do. So if it isn't safe to make a mistake, it isn't safe to own it either. Someone has to go first. If anything, out of this first part of the episode today that I'm hoping someone would get, is take that risk. If you don't own your mistakes, and I've made many, you don't own your life. You can't just own the times you're smiling, the times that someone's giving you praise or a pat on the back or an A+, or you get into, you accomplish something you've been working on. So I have massive empathy for everyone who's struggling today. Parents, youngsters, government decision makers, because obviously, let's say they were like life advisors, right? So people come to them and they're like, what should I do? And they give you their answer. And we keep track of all that for the last couple decades. So everyone in the government is like a life advisor. And we've kept a track record on what their responses were to our queries, right? To our quandaries, to our uncertainty. Because again, one way to help get out of depression and get out of, kind of being sunken down is, what direction do I take? What do I choose? If I'm living life at the middle of a train station, I don't know what train to get on, it's going to suck living at a train station. So I need clarity to be able to choose, where do I go next? What do I do now? How do I get out of this? Parents are asking that all the time. How do I get a 50% raise? Why do you think so many youngsters these days are looking at starting businesses probably at a much higher rate, I would think, I could do the research, and have a much bigger, almost a rebellious entrepreneurial spirit about them, per capita, right? Probably a hell of a lot higher than previous generations, because they already had peace of mind. And that's what I'm getting at. But government is making choices that ruin your shot at peace of mind, which we, even though there were plagues and floods and crappy kings and queens and all the centuries before 1971, if a government is literally set up a system that destroys your shot at peace of mind, that's evil. That to me is evil, because none of us asked to be here. None of us did. We didn't have a vote. Could you imagine if, like, the parts, the egg, and if they could be like, can we see humanity first before we like hook up here in the womb? I think most of them would just say, I decline. I'll decline. I'll give it a few more decades until maybe this humanity thing blows up and governments fail and humanity gets its lands back, gets its freedom back, gets America back. The number one thing that's ruining the American dream is the money printing. It is the government. It is their choices. So if we go back to creating a track record on them being life advisors for the last couple decades, easily, no one would hire them. There isn't one person that would choose that track record to be the guiding force in decision-making in their lives. Not one. Not one. But they are making the decisions. We just aren't really aware of it. And that's the mission of the rest of my life. While I'm breathing, while I spin around the sun, I just want to try to carry a message until you all say, or if you ever say, your message is useless, Paul. You're wasting your breath. Now, you'd have to tell me that I was en masse, and I'll check out and move on to something else. You can resist the message, and I'm going to keep coming. Because I know it's real. I've lived it. I have lived this. And I wondered about how is this happening, right? How is our society with the war on drugs and extreme racism and extreme hate and defund the police and all these crazy ideas, how is all this? This is not a Xerox copy of centuries in the past. This is a massive detour. This is like society, humanity is so different than what it used to be like on the planet. What caused that? What has the power to cause that? People caused it. It wasn't alien pollution. It wasn't some toxic meteor that landed on the planet and has poisoned our minds. So, in the next article, I want to first make a reference, and guys, gals, girls, everything in between, everyone who's listening, overcoming whatever's in front of you is the deal. It isn't arriving somewhere where there's nothing to overcome. It is overcoming. What life will continue to serve up to you is something to overcome. Y'all read the lyrics to the Miley Cyrus song. Maybe your dad wrote it, but The Climb, just read the lyrics. Read the lyrics. It sums up things perfectly. So one of the great things, athletes, which is easy to reference athletes, a lot of them come from extremely difficult childhoods. Overcoming has been their thing, right? And so for Tiger Woods, first ultra successful African-American in pretty much a white sport up until then, which is golf. Thankfully, it's not that way anymore. But all it takes is someone to say, I can do that, I want to do that, I'm going to do that. That's all it takes. Man on the moon, first African-American in a that's all it takes is someone to say, I can do that, I want to do that, I'm going to do that. So Tiger Woods is famous for lots of sayings, and another flawed human being. Oops, probably just broke your eardrums hitting my mic. Sorry, producer. He said he never hit a golf shot without first seeing where the ball was going to land before he swung. Vision. Seeing the connection between where something is now and where it's going to land. Never hit a golf shot without first seeing in his mind where the ball was going to land before he swung. So go back to the youth. Where do the youth land? They land in their 30s and 40s. What's in between 13 and 30? Knowing stuff, being good at stuff, figuring stuff out. That's why the school system was important to bring up first, because it leads to the next thing. The next thing is, where do we land? Well, when all the Europeans came to America, they were leaving something they didn't like for something they were also not going to like, but it was a different set of things they weren't going to like. It was things they were going to be able to overcome. 7 out of 10 of those immigrants would die either on the journey, the 2-month journey on the Atlantic in a wooden ship, or once they got to the shore. 7 out of 10. Like, if I set up a country, there was just some land, there was no government yet really, and we could all go there, but 7 out of 10 of us, you heard, the odds aren't good of you making it. How many would even try today? And that's another thing. It's another example of just how unresilient or lacking in resilience our humanity has become. And it's because we've been buried in things that can't be overcome and weren't even identified in our minds until what I'm trying to do, which is show you exactly what the force is that's jacking up your ability to enjoy life here. 13-year-olds land in a home when they're 30. You used to be able to be buying that house in your 20s. So in the 60s and 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, you were buying a home, saving for that down payment for 2 years in your 20s. Now it's up in the late 30s. Whoa. So it's about vision. The young today, they don't see themselves owning a home. They don't see themselves owning the dirt they're sleeping on. In their bed, of course, not tents. There's a lot more people in tents today. There was a Supreme Court case that came before the Supreme Court about a year ago. It was a town in Oregon, I believe. The city was suing to get these, homeless encampments moved off city property. Other jurisdictions, California came in and said, that's not right, leave them alone, blah, blah, blah. And the city's just saying, hey, we financially don't have what it takes to support this, and the law says they can't be here, and we're just trying to enforce the law. All the way to the Supreme Court. It doesn't matter what the Supreme Court decision was, really, in this episode. What matters is that most of those homeless people were working. They were working. They couldn't afford to find an apartment to rent. They couldn't rent. They couldn't pay rent for a studio or an efficiency in a hotel or motel. The ones that were camped out on the city sidewalks had jobs. What would ever cause, in a world that was definitely not set up by us, but we're part of it, for thousands of years, people could afford to live somewhere. Their wages, as they age, grow faster than the cost of living. How could it suddenly be different? And what hell could it possibly be to live in a tent and go to a job? Are you doing your bathroom activities at a fast food restaurant? At a coffee shop in the morning? You're brushing your teeth? Are you showering? The government isn't hearing what the problem is. I'm hoping you do. You can be a change agent for how you live. So the next article, even among successful first-time buyers, a number have debts holding them back from saving for a down payment. Among those who said saving for a down payment was difficult, the most cited hurdles were high rent, 49%, student loans, 40%, credit card debt, 36%, and car loans, 33%. So most people don't get out of high school and buy a home. Most people don't get out of college and buy a home. And if you're just graduating high school, you're probably not going to own a home. So you're thinking to yourself, okay, I'm 13, 30, where do I land? Where does that golf shot land? You're looking for vision. Clarity is necessary. For vision, these days people don't see that happening. Now, I'm definitely guilty occasionally of, if I don't think I'm going to be good at something, I won't even try. I can empathize if anyone else can relate to that. If I'm not probably going to be good at something like, salsa dancing. I'll probably not be good at that. At least I think that. I might end up being good at it, but it's pretty much kept me from ever taking a salsa lesson. Just as an example. So if I don't think that there's asphalt between me in high school and home ownership, I'm not going to try. But oh my goodness, what it does for a city, a town, for humans to own a piece of the planet they're spinning on. And that was one of the main reasons to exit Europe, where home ownership is very difficult. One, just availability, to a land where it was just forested, right? And you could make your log cabin. You could have a house in a couple months. Government at different times was giving away land. So you got land. Imagine having, 5 acres, an acre, 100 acres. Your own home. Yes, there were other problems, other afflictions to deal with, but we got through that. It wasn't something that was constant, 24/7. First-time home buyers hit an all-time low. In 1981, 44% of people were buying a home. Today, 24%. And that continues to go down. How would that ever go up? Well, your earnings would have to outpace the cost of living. So if you're coming out of high school and you're saving money, but you got to pay rent because you didn't want to live in your car or in a tent somewhere, that rent is keeping you from saving a little extra over a couple years. I think it's 8 years now, and generally it takes to save for a home. Long ago, just 50 years ago, it was 2 years. That's huge. In the early article, we talked about poor education will have an impact on economic output. Not being able to understand where the ball is going to land with confidence, you won't take the shot. You won't take the shot. So let's say someone, Tiger Woods, he hit his ball out in the fairway. They walk him out. He walks out to the ball. They put a blindfold on him, spin around 3 times. You think that ball is going to go anywhere that he's going to be happy about when he takes a blindfold off? Confusion. I want to end that for anyone who's watching. The confusion, and it isn't going to change what's causing you in your youth, in your 30s, in your 40s, everyone on the planet. 70% of the country said life in America is one hell of a struggle. They said other things, but one hell of a struggle. All of a sudden, what caused that? Right? America, not in the top 5 happiest countries on the planet. Not in the top 10, not in the top 15, not in the top 20. Barely in the top 25 at 24. Look it up. What caused that? If the American dream was the first time humanity ever sang the song of freedom, personal ability to achieve peace of mind, that song ain't playing anymore. And people need to look at this stuff. People need to start looking. You got to be real. That song isn't playing anymore. So what can you do? What can parents do? How can parents help kids? It's the same thing that the Europeans made when they left a land for a different one. Within this great country, still a great country, the greatest country on earth, because it still has a shot. We just slipped a little. Mathematically speaking, this money printing thing can't go on too much longer. There's a resource they're burning called the dollar, and 97% of that resource has been burnt. Well, eventually, that resource doesn't have anything left to give you, mathematically speaking, and so all of this hell ends. And a new hell comes, and I don't want to talk about being a prepper, but, keep that over here to the side a little bit in your thought bubbles. I want to talk about how you would start an individual revolution. When we think about revolution in the singular sense, we think of something that just turns. When we think about, the American Revolution, French Revolution, we think about millions of people, tons of people coming together, fighting something, changing something, fighting to change something. And you think your votes do that. And they haven't done that, and they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Just real quick, we talked to my our beloved New Yorkers, right? They live in a state, one of 50. They're in New York. Thomas Jefferson, I think I said this before, right? He said, he's famous for saying many things. One thing that applies here is, you get the government you deserve. So Mandami is not the problem. It's people thinking, so many people thinking, that more handouts solves the problem. You think your creator made something to be seeking handouts? That's not to guilt anyone. That's to say you are made of the most magical stuff. The most magical stuff. You even have fingers, right? And you wouldn't be able to do squat. We wouldn't be building homes without a thumb. You wouldn't be doing so much without thumbs. This is magical, right? Don't laugh at me. We are magical beings. And you think that somehow nature just started, like the toxic meteor that landed on the planet, fluoride, that suddenly we're incapable of self-propulsion? You guys are working harder than ever. You're stressing harder than ever. You're failing harder than ever. And some are succeeding harder than ever. No one's success today, generally speaking, is at the expense of anyone else. There is, of course, an old saying, I'd rather be lucky than good. Because luck is, for sure, a couple people won the lottery recently. That's luck. They can't influence how those numbers come up, even if they pick the numbers themselves instead of letting the machine do it. That's luck. Luck is like it was delivered. Good stuff, delivered, boom. Being good at something, you're still wondering if the good stuff's going to come someday. That's why the saying, rather be lucky than good. To get lucky and have peace of mind, I think the odds are against you. You've got to work for it. Life on earth is about overcoming stuff. So it's time for an individual revolution. That you say to yourself, that parents say to themselves, looking at those kids who didn't ask to be here and say, man, last 10 years, science project, you perform the exact same science project twice, you get the exact same result, proven. The third time, fourth time, fifth time, absolute. You're going to get the exact same outcome from that recipe of science project that you put together. 10 years, life's getting tougher, not easier. Kids are struggling more, not less. So that science project proves whatever we've been doing Monday through Friday, and then whatever we're doing Saturday and Sunday, and on holidays, and on birthdays, produces the same result, more misery. We've got to look at what is certainly inside of Americans. And people walking here across the Rio Grande today, that's the mindset that is American. I feel for them. Are they coming up, against some laws and trespassing and criminals come with them? Yeah, I'm not going to get into that conversation. But I get the mindset that is willing to walk through hostile territory 1,000 miles. You could sail across the Atlantic, spend 2 months on a boat. That's a struggle. That could be scary. Boats can sink. You could die along the way. But it's different than walking. Where they live seems to be hell, literal hell. We still offer the promise that it can be better. And even if they're living in what we would consider tough circumstances, it's still better than a house made out of pallets. So the individual revolution is you waking up to clarity and seeing what you can and cannot overcome. Because life on earth is about overcoming. And the house prices, why are they going to keep going up, Paul? Well, because the government's going to keep paying its bills with money out of thin air, which causes all commodity. What do you think a home's made out of? Right? It causes all commodity prices to go up. Look at the periodic table, right? Commodities, right? Go look it up online. What are the commodities? They go into a home. They go into getting stuff to the job site. They go into the workers having the energy food to literally swing a hammer or, run a nail gun or a saw or carry stuff or lay bricks, pour concrete. As the government prints to pay its bills, they will never come to you. I mean, I wish they could, but it doesn't seem like they're ever going to come to you. Science project proven. Politicians, they're just not going to come to you and tell you that they're the ones causing you to be frickin' miserable in the greatest country on the planet. So let me smash this mirror. Let me clear out the fog and the smoke and all that crap and show you that forces matter. The source of everything matters. The source of bills going higher is money printing. It's a group of people that get to pay their bills with monopoly money, and you don't. And if that monopoly money they were creating found its way equally into your paycheck, then I wouldn't be talking about this. I could still be talking about the death of money, because the dollar, its buying power is only 3 cents today. Used to be 100, now it's 3. So what does that say? 97% of the value of the dollar is gone. So they're killing it as they create it out of thin air. If you did play Monopoly with someone, and every time they went bankrupt, they just got to open a new game box and pull out the bank, and they served themselves up with a whole fresh bank, the entire thing, and they kept playing, that's called cheating. That's called not reality. That's not how it works. Right? So the government has no checks and balances on making better decisions. You guys keep voting for them. The same politicians with even crazier ideas keep running. You keep voting for them. You'll vote for the ones that want to shut all that down too, and they can't do anything about it. So the individual revolution, where inside of this country could you relocate to? You can change where you are. You just can't change what the government's doing. You can't change the forces that are affecting you. You want kids to do better in school? Let's look at some, locales where maybe kids are enjoying school. Parents aren't stressed. There's still challenges, right? We're not talking about, there's no land where you're going to go and there's nothing that's going to be difficult. That doesn't exist. Just like a unicorn. Just like Frosty the Snowman. Just like Santa Claus. They don't exist. So stop thinking about it. Stop getting sucked into the commercial world that just constantly throws all these ads at you and treats you like a moron. These commercials these days, the gecko. The gecko is my insurance sale. So I'm going to take insurance advice from a gecko. What is that messaging to you? This magical creation that you would follow? You would talk to a gecko? I don't want to pick on anybody, but just as an example, that's what a company thinks, that's what we are? Magical thinking? The movies they make today, a lot of times are true stories or, it's imaginary stuff. You guys got to work at drawing yourself back. Life is happening where your feet are. And it is always true. Whether your head's in the game or not, life is happening where your feet are. I am present right now speaking to you about something I hold near and dear to my heart. I'm sure many others have seen the clarity that I talk about, but I'm walking through fear to come onto a camera and a mic and tell you about it. And of course, my most famous saying, as soon as you get on, you can understand language. If I were having kids today, I would be telling them, as soon as they understood the language I was speaking in, that everything you want in life, son, everything you want in life, daughter, is always going to lie on the other side of fear. Fear is the guardian of great. And I think one of the greatest things in possible existence is peace of mind. Oh my God, could you just imagine if you were utterly relaxed Sunday through Saturday, every day? You had your challenges. You bumped your knee, you fell down, your ice cream cone slipped out and fell on the concrete, the sidewalk. Someone got mad at you. Someone yelled at you in traffic. Someone got a promotion instead of you. It's always going to be that stuff. But imagine if at all times you had peace of mind. There wasn't screaming and conflict and questioning and second guessing going on in your head all day. Imagine. So fear is the guardian of great. That's how it's set up. Deer don't have to deal with that. They just go about doing what they're doing. Bears, salmon, eagles. Humans have this. It's what's unique about having feelings, fears. Deer hears something funny, hears a twig branch in the woods, it stops drinking water, looks up. It checks it out. 9 times out of 10, if it doesn't see something, it's going to run. But that's a healthy fear. That's just, it wants to continue breathing. You look at sex trafficking, the drug abuse, how horrible people are to each other, attacking some neighboring country, just lobbing missiles into apartment buildings. Or some other country just saying, you used to be part of us and you're still part of us. And one day, we're going to threaten you so harshly, you're going to be part of us. Taiwan. What? If everyone was at peace of mind, guess what the number one thing is you would want next? Nothing to disturb that. So are we going to go to war? We're at peace of mind. Kind of don't. We're not going to go to war. We're not going to invent more war machines. We're not going to spend all this money, crazy AI. That's episode 3. Or a peace of mind. Like, I'm making s'mores, man. I'm talking to people. I'm talking to friends. Peace of mind. If you're going to enjoy your time here, your 80 years here, it's going to require that. What's that? How's that going to be acquired? It's going to be you crossing over lines of fear. Things you're saying to yourself, I can't do, don't want to do. Check it out. Are you saying you literally can't do it because you don't have arms and legs? Or won't? Can't or won't? Stop going, not gonna. Put it in a box. Can't relocate, can't change up how it is, can't say goodbye to the friends and family we're used to, can't say goodbye to the job. Lots of jobs these days. You can work remote. I don't care. It's just an offering. Peace of mind. Number one ingredient to enjoying your time on the planet. Government, their actions are destroying that for you. Evidenced in home ownership, evidenced in test scores, evidenced in where we are as a country on the list of happiest countries on the planet. The entire planet. This magical thing that literally is tilted even. It's 32 degrees off center. And if it wasn't, the weather would be the same in bands. You would have bands of weather around the globe that would never change. We would all live probably within 700 miles north and south of the equator. We have diversity on this planet, even because the damn thing doesn't sit straight up and down, right? You heard of north and true north? If it weren't for that alteration, you wouldn't have any variation in the weather. If we weren't the perfect distance from the sun, too hot, too cold, we ain't here. If we didn't have an molten iron core at the center of the planet, we wouldn't have a magnetic field that protects us from the sun and all that crazy stuff. Dial into that, guys. That stuff's real. Moon buggy on a planet. Doesn't matter if you're jumping into an old pickup truck or a Bentley. You're driving a moon buggy on a planet. It's time for y'all to start taking a look at that. I want to end the show with this. If you have never slept on the ground in a tent, and you can make a tent out of a tarp, you gotta consider that you would add a different perspective into your soup of thought, that you would get a different reference point. So I want to talk to you about the greatest camping trip I ever went on. And I've been on tons. It was survival school in the military. Spokane, Washington, February, 3 feet of snow. And it would get up to like 36 during the day, not every day, but so the snow would kind of melt, so you're all wet. And you pairs of 2, given 3 days of calories, so 6,000 calories. Volume-wise, it was like one big meal. So 3 days of calories for 5 days of evading capture in Spokane, Washington, in the snow in February. Greatest camping trip I ever went on. Greatest camping trip I ever went on. You know, at the end of it, the people that didn't get caught, you know, we have rally points. You had to get here. You can't just walk a straight line. So that might be 3 clicks away, and you got to go 5 or 6 clicks to end up there to evade capture. And I grew up camping, so I love it. But the greatest part about that was truly feeling me, just alone. I had one partner, so we're all in teams of 2, but it was, what can I do? I've never been here before, never done this evasion thing before in the military. Eating ants, like you find an old stump, you kick it over, you kick into it, whatever, there'll be hibernating ants. They eat them. They taste like orange peels. You eat grubs. They don't taste good, so you don't chew them. You just swallow them. Protein, right? You eat, like this just, I'm not saying like prepare for like living off the land as a caveman. I'm saying if you haven't camped, and if you do go camping and it's all Gucci and you bring generators and all that stuff, come on. I'm just saying do something, go camping before there is snow on the ground, even though I loved it. You literally dig a bed out of the snow, pine tree branches, lay that down, sleeping bag on top, pitch a little tarp over that, and you're good. It was a whole week, and never got caught until the very end. Then you're surrounded by snowmobiles and helicopters and dudes wearing all black. And then you're taken to the POW camp where they mess with you. But that camping trip, any camping trip, just get a taste for what you actually spring forth from, the world around you. Drop out of this imaginary world of screens. Just check back in. If nothing changes,